Women Making Waves.
You always seem to be very together, Susie. So I have to ask you, what's your biggest challenge in your life?
Oh, I do like that, Linda. Me together. That is quite funny. But anyway, what is challenging to me in life is clearing up my house of rubbish on stuff that I have not used for about 20 years.
Yeah.
I find that really hard. That's a big challenge for me. Is that the same for you?
Well, you know what I find challenging when it comes to decluttering, and that would be getting rid of things that maybe other people had, like my parents, my grandparents, and it feels like if you're throwing it out, you're throwing part of them out, which is a bit ridiculous, to be quite honest.
Yes, you're right. You do feel as if
Memory.
Memories. That's a good reason, actually. Yeah, it's an interesting one. But I think over the years, when you have something sitting in your cupboard for 20 years and you haven't looked at it or even opened it up, and then when you do want to clear it up, you spend about 10 minutes looking and think, do I need this? Should I tuck it out?
Actually, that reminds me of something. I found a couple of items that I had bought about 4 years ago for Christmas presents, and I hadn't actually... I think I'd bought too many things, you know. And I found 2 items. I thought, they're quite nice, actually. Is it a bit bad to keep them yourself? You really meant them for someone else.
So did you reuse them then after you'd found them? Or did you put them back in the cupboard?
Sitting there, back in the cupboard.
So you put them
I
back
keep
in?
Thinking, I could maybe just keep those. One's a nice brooch. I could do with a nice brooch, couldn't I?
Interesting.
So that's a bit of a challenge, isn't it?
Well, I think this thing about recycling stuff. I mean, we literally today took some furniture from a room that just gathers everything that we don't need, and we took it down to 3 charity shops. One charity shop was full of stuff. They couldn't take any more furniture. And
I saw you coming.
Yeah, they did see us coming, that's true. And then one absolutely lovely guy, he even helped us take the stuff out. He couldn't wait to get the stuff out of our car, so that was great because it was quite heavy stuff. And he took it out, and he was just chuffed to bits to have it. So I do believe in trying to recycle things now, especially clothes as well.
And one man's rubbish is another man's gold, isn't it?
That's
really?
Profound. That's a profound statement. That really is. Yeah. Well, talking about challenges, we have 2 women today, don't we, that are sort of testing that word very well, aren't they?
Yes, indeed. We are going to be speaking to author Maud Blair, a very renowned author, actually, who has written about her experiences of apartheid when she grew up in Rhodesia, now Zimbabwe.
And we have Rachel Hales. She's the founder of Get Synergized, and she has over 25 years of experience in the intersection of community and businesses, and a really interesting lady talking about her life living at home and how the compassion in her parents gave her the motivation to do the job that she is doing now. So it'll be really, really lovely to be able to talk to them later on today.
And their challenges far greater than mine, that's for sure.
And mine, absolutely.
You're listening to Women Making Waves radio show and podcast, brought to you by Suzie Thorpe and Linda Ness. This show is all about women doing extraordinary things.
We're delighted to welcome Maud Blair, a renowned Cambridge-based author known for her vivid storytelling about her life under British rule in Rhodesia, now Zimbabwe. With over 10 years of experience teaching and consulting on race and gender issues, she shares insights from her acclaimed book, In Between, while managing life in Cambridge with her large family. Welcome, Maud Blair, to Women Making Waves.
Nice to be here.
Tell us a little bit about your early life in Rhodesia, well now Zimbabwe, Maud. What was that like?
It depends how early you want to go, because I was born on a farm and spent my first 4 years in a village with my mother, where all I can remember is being really happy.
Oh, that's lovely.
But because Rhodesia was a segregated society, apartheid really, I wasn't able to go to the local village school because I'm mixed race, and all my family were my half siblings. We shared a mother, but they had an African mother and I had an English father. So I wasn't able to go to the local school because I was termed a coloured, in other words, not an African. So I was sent away to a boarding school at the age of 4, which was almost 400 kilometers away from my mother. And I wasn't allowed to see her for the first 3 years. I couldn't speak any English in that first year, obviously, because I had never spoken English before that. But I wasn't allowed to go home for the first 3 years of primary school. So, of course, I didn't forget how to speak my language, but I wasn't allowed to speak it. So I was always afraid, even after the 3 years were up and I finally managed to visit my mother. I was always afraid to speak Shona, which was my mother tongue. And my journey to becoming British started then.
It sounds like there was racism from both sides towards you, from both black people and white people. Is that a fair statement?
I don't know what other people experienced. I can honestly say I don't remember ever experiencing racism from black people. Ever.
Okay.
Yeah.
But you weren't able to go to the village school. Was that some kind of rule?
That was government. That wasn't my family.
Oh, wow.
That was a government thing because our communities were segregated. White people went to their own schools, black people went to their own schools, and we, the sort of middle, and they called us coloured, we went to our own schools. I think that taking me away from my mother at the age of 4, not being able to see her for the first 3 years, not being allowed to speak my language, was really part of changing my identity.
Yeah.
And in the process, many of us, I was lucky in so many respects, but many of the other people that I knew that I went to school with became alienated from their families.
Wow.
My family fought to keep me. And the result is I still speak Shona and I know some of the customs. A lot of them I had to relearn or learn. Yeah.
Maud, really lovely to hear that you said you had a very lovely, happy childhood. And you're now saying to us that your parents were very strong in making sure that they could still have a connection with you and see you and be part of your life. What was the most defining moment about being with your mother and father, being happy? What was the sort of thing that made you happy?
Well, I'll have to reverse because I have never in my life met my father.
Okay.
So I didn't know who he was. I just knew that he was an Englishman. That's all I knew. And what made me happy, I think, in the first 4 years of my life and on those occasions when I went home, is the fact that I just felt loved by everybody. I felt welcome in the village. The family acknowledged me. I don't know what they thought about the fact that I wouldn't speak my language because I was so scared. I didn't realize, of course, that I wasn't speaking my language, not because my family didn't want me to, but that I wasn't allowed to speak it at school. And so I would always fear that if I spoke Shona, my family would tell the nuns about and say, oh, she was speaking Shona, And so I was terrified to speak it, even though I could understand what everybody was saying.
Yeah.
I dread to think what they thought of me for not wanting to speak my language at that time, because I really didn't understand the context.
But you were fairly young, weren't you? So it
was... I was only 7 when I was home the first time.
Yeah. But you still felt that fear then, that fear of not wanting to speak your language.
Well, we would be punished at school if we spoke our language. And so I was afraid of punishment. I was afraid that my mother would ring up, not ring up. I didn't even know about telephones at that time. That she would talk to somebody and say she was speaking Shona and I'd be punished. I know so many other people who went through the same experience, who just wouldn't speak their language, whatever, whether it was Ndebele or whether it was Shona, because they were afraid.
Gosh, that's pretty awful.
What were your experiences like at school? Did you absolutely hate it, or were there some redeeming
Now, this is
factors?
the interesting bit. I was raised literally by nuns from the age of 4 right until I finished my A-levels. And they were really good to us. I can't speak for everybody. I think I've only met one person who didn't have a good experience. I think they were really good to us. In general, they were really good to us. Yeah, they treated us well. I was happy at school, I have to say. I was happy at school, yeah.
And you received a good education by the sound of it as well.
Yes, yeah, I think I was one of the few of my generation that made it to university, but that was only because I was helped when I'd done my O levels. My head teacher, who was a nun, I think came from quite a wealthy German family, and her parents paid for me to go and do A levels.
No,
Yeah.
that's amazing.
That is lovely.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is
And
lovely.
from school, you went on to University College of Rhodesia, is that right?
That's right. At that time, it was still a college of the University of London. It became University of Rhodesia. I think I had already left, yeah, because my degree is a London degree as opposed to a Rhodesian degree.
Ah,
Yeah.
right. Okay.
And I think that it was after I finished my degree that the University of Rhodesia broke away from London. Yeah.
Right. Did you find that studying your degree in English history, did it open up a lot of ideas and a lot of things that you never knew before?
Not really. My whole education was a British education. We had
Oh,
exactly the same syllabus as people in England.
oh, right.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Yeah.
where
From,
did you?
from primary school right through,
Yeah.
yeah.
So it was your master's degree that really gave you an insight into your own history and enlightenment about where
Yeah.
your family were born and.
By and large, when I studied history at university, the lecturer that I had did begin to point out a lot of things that I hadn't realized about. He'd come, I think he was English actually, and he'd say things like, they make you think that the Zimbabwe ruins were built by King Solomon, but carbon dating actually shows that they were built by local African people. He said things like that that completely stunned me in a way.
Yeah.
I thought, oh my gosh,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's really interesting.
And the writing, when did that start, Maud? When did you become interested in writing?
Well, I became an academic. I was teaching at the Open University and I did some academic writing. I had always been interested. In fact, I started a writing course that I never finished. I've always been interested in writing. But to be quite honest, I then got into academia and writing academic books and articles and so on, and raising a family at the same time as a single parent. So I really just didn't have the time to write things that I was interested in. And then by the time I retired, my focus became my autobiography. Yeah. I mean, I used to write short stories for my children all the time. I've got a little collection of short stories, but I've never, ever given them to anybody. I don't think they're good enough. But they were just little stories I'd write for my children and tell them the story at bedtime, that sort of thing. So I was interested in writing children's stories, but I never really followed it through.
You've written several books, but I mentioned in the introduction your memoir In Between. What was the motivation for writing this book?
Motivation was my descendants, my grandchildren growing up here, not knowing anything about my history, and potentially living here forever when they get married and the others get married, when they have children, and all my descendants. Eventually, that link with Africa will be lost.
Yeah.
And I was desperate that they must always know. It doesn't matter what they look like, they must always know their African heritage. That was really important to me. I have to say, the real motive, the real thing that finally pushed me to writing it was I used to babysit for my grandchildren, obviously. And one particular granddaughter I can think of, or two of them that I can think of that are sisters, I'd say, what book would you like to read before going to bed? And they'd say, no, Grandma, do you remember that story you told us about such and such? Tell it to us again. And, I tell them little snippets of stories from my life. And they always wanted me to repeat those stories. And one day, one of the girls said, Grandma, you really need to write this down so that we can tell your story to our children.
Oh, lovely.
Oh, that's great.
And I thought, well, I've wanted to do this for ages, but the only way to do it is to get away from everybody and go and be isolated somewhere. So, yeah. So it was a really good year for me that year.
And are you still in touch with your family in Africa?
I took my children and grandchildren to Zimbabwe in 2022 on holiday. We went to the village where my mother lived. and we explored the country, and we had the most memorable holiday ever. Yeah, I just took everything I had saved and went with all my kids.
I can imagine that must have been amazing. Had you been away a long time then? When you left the school, did you ever go back to the village?
When did I leave Zimbabwe? I think I left a year after I graduated. I was a teacher and I taught for 1 year. And then I met my now ex-husband, but very good friend. And we realized he was white. We realized we weren't going to live in Rhodesia. It wasn't possible because we had to live in segregated communities. We couldn't go to restaurants together. We couldn't do things together at all. So we knew that we had to leave the country. Yeah. And that was in end of 1973, we came to England.
And how did you find coming to England? Was the culture very, very different for you?
Not really. I was brought up in a British culture. I mean, Rhodesia was a British colony, and I kind of had a sense. Well, I say that, but I think it was quite different. I think it was very different. And I'll tell you one of the things that I do mention in the book. I was so enthralled, if you like, by the fact we went to live in a small village in Essex. I was the only non-white person in the village, but everybody was welcoming and kind. And that for me was very different. It was a different experience. There was no sort of overt, direct racism like I'd experienced in Zimbabwe. There was no segregation. I lived with my family. Our neighbors were wonderful. And that was a major change for me. And I remember writing a letter to my aunt, who was very political. It's thanks to my aunt that I kept my language going and understood the politics later on when about what was happening in the country. But I wrote to her and I said, this is just an amazing place. It's so different from Rhodesia. I can go anywhere I want. There's no segregation. I can go to restaurants, and I sort of expressed how free we were here. But of course, it was because I understood racism as being the racism I had experienced all my life. It was overt, it was in my face, it was, you're that color, therefore you go to that school, you can't go to this restaurant, you can't be with these people, and so on. It was so direct, so overt, that I didn't recognize subtleties in racism when I, because I was just looking for somebody to say to me, you can't come to my restaurant, or you can't try on clothes in shops, because we weren't allowed to try on clothes.
Oh gosh.
In department stores, only white people were allowed to do that.
Maud, the book In Between, I just want to go back to the book In Between. Yeah. There is another book that I would love to touch on, but the book In Between, was it a very emotional time writing this book?
The first year was very emotional. It was I think it was 2013. And it was the year my sister died. Well, one of the second oldest in the family had come to live in England. And she lived here in Cambridge with me, and she died that year. I actually went to write the book in France. I just didn't feel, I was a busy grandmother, and I still am. And I just didn't think I was going to find the time to just sit and focus. So I told the family, I'm going away for a whole year. I'm going to go and live in France, and I'm going to write the book. And you can come and visit during the school holidays, but that's the only time I'm going to give you. And I think personality-wise, I need routine. If I don't have routine, if I'm in the middle of writing and then somebody rings me and says, Mum, could you pick up so-on from school? I won't write again for the rest of the day. It's just my personality type, I guess. So I needed to get away and just focus and create a routine for myself. So that's what I did by going to France. It didn't take long from Stansted. It took 20 minutes to fly to Tarbes.
That is a way to get things done, actually, isn't it? Take yourself
It was
out
the only
of
way
your
for
life.
me. Yeah. But your question about was it emotional? Because my sister had died. She was my favorite sister. She was little mother to me. She was the second oldest, and we'd been very close throughout my growing up. And then she came to live in England. So we were very close here. And then she died. And then I went to France. And that the first, I would say 3 to 4 months was very emotional. And one of the reasons it was emotional is not just that I kept thinking about my sister and all the time I had with her, But it was also the time when all the, I guess it's sweet corn that they grow for cattle feed in France. The cottage I was in had a field just close by, which was full of sweet corn. I didn't realize, I thought it was maize, and I thought it was edible, but it wasn't. It was really for cattle feed. But it evoked my village. It was so, I kept thinking, I'd look out there and I'd think of home. And so I was very emotional. The first 3, 4 months, yeah. And then I sort of calmed down and really got into the book, yeah.
Sounds like the perfect location, actually, as well. If it was bringing back memories, that would spark good memories to write. But you've written several books. I think Susie was alluding to this earlier on. And a particular interest, I think, to Susie as well, we were talking about this earlier, Why Pick on Me, which discusses school exclusion relating to race. What made you write that book? Why was that?
It was the subject of my PhD. I was studying the exclusion of Black pupils from schools at the time when I was doing it. Gosh, how long ago was that? I think I got my PhD in 1999. And at that time, in the education system, Black children, and in particular Black boys, I mean, they were excluded in hordes, literally, and put in special schools and so on. So I was researching that. And that's where that was my PhD thesis.
Maud, do you think after writing these books, do you think that you as a grandmother, as a woman, as a daughter, as a sister, do you feel you've made some sense of your identity and the unrest in Zimbabwe? Do you feel that your message through these books, you'll say you're writing it for your own children and family, but do you get feedback from other readers, other people saying, this makes a lot of sense, this is very, very troubling?
I have received quite a lot of feedback from people saying exactly that. But I went to launch the book in Zimbabwe in July, and I spoke to younger Zimbabweans, the people who are my children's age, and they had no idea of that history. They had no idea. They knew that the British had once colonized, but they had no idea what life was like under colonialism. And they were shocked. I was shocked as well with all those that I spoke with who said they had no idea of the role of young people in the liberation struggle. Because what happened was that a lot of young people left school and went out into the wild to support the fighters. And many of them either lost their lives or were disabled or had grown too old now to go back to pick up from where they had left. It affected young people quite a lot. A lot of young male and female left their schools and went into the bush to help fight for liberation. Yeah. The young people of today didn't know about that.
Yes. That's extraordinary. I'm really surprised.
Most extraordinary. Unfortunately, I was in Zimbabwe for a very short time. I didn't have the opportunity to go into schools and say, what do you teach in history? I would love to find out actually what kind of history do they teach? Are they still teaching British colonial history? I don't know.
It's almost like they're trying to cover that up, but why would you?
I don't think so. I just think they didn't organize. These are people who fought for their liberation, but had never run a country before, if you like. So there was a hell of a lot to be learned in terms of. You can't just say, right, we're getting rid of this curriculum when you haven't got another one to replace it with.
Yes.
So, they needed people to write history books. They needed people to change things. Some things have been done. I know for sure that some things have been done. But I'm not sure that there were enough people who could rewrite the history that we learned, the history that was telling us that African people have achieved nothing, they don't have a culture, they don't have a past, they don't have a history. All those things that I was taught needs to be unpacked and children be allowed to talk about it and new history books be written about it. But Zimbabwe has lost a very, very high percentage of its educated people. They live abroad.
Gosh.
So that's one of the disadvantages, really. Yeah.
And your book, the one that you just mentioned, Why Pick on Me?
Yeah.
What is the title of Why Pick on Me? Why did you pick this title?
This title, because where I interviewed a lot of parents and students around schools around the country, and there was always this assertion, if you like, that a lot of the punishments, a lot of the exclusions were unfair and racist, and that Black students were more likely to be punished for an offense. For example, just to give you one example that rings a bell, a student who told me that he'd put his head down. His father was very strict about him studying, ignore what other people are doing. But there was one particular white boy in his school who was constantly trying to get a fight out of him. And then one day he called him all kinds of racist names. And this boy turned around and hit him. So there was a fight. Well, the Black boy who'd been trying to avoid the fight and had been trying to keep his head down, as his parents had advised, was excluded. The white boy wasn't.
Yeah.
So it was that kind of inequality, that kind of prejudice, if you like, that students told me about over and over and over. And, they always pick on us Black pupils. They always pick on us. That's where the topic came from.
And consequently, you've gone on to write and research so much more and written your book. Are you very proud of your book, In Between, Maud?
I'm very glad I wrote it, is one thing. I think this is the thing with writing, not necessarily academic books. Academic books, you want it done, you've got your research facts are all there in front of you, you put it down and you get rid of it, it's like gone. This personal book is going to stay in my family forever. And I never was satisfied with it. I wanted to rewrite and rewrite and rewrite. And so I've stopped reading it, because every time I read it, I think, I wish I'd said this instead of that, or I wish I'd this way instead of that way. So I'm glad it's out there. I'm glad, a lot of people who've read it have told me how much they've enjoyed reading it. And I'm glad I've got a legacy for my descendants. I hope that people will read the book, because I think most people don't really know what colonialism was about. I really hope a lot of people in Africa read the book, because I think the young don't have that knowledge either. But it's difficult. I launched the book in Zimbabwe, but Zimbabwe is struggling financially. People can't afford a book. They're struggling just to put food on the table. So the majority of Zimbabweans. In fact, my nephew, he lives in Zimbabwe, he's on holiday here. He introduced me to his friends, and I went and spoke about the book and, read bits to them. And they were just astounded. They had no idea that their country had been like that.
And not all that long ago in the scheme of things, actually.
No, really not that long ago.
Thank you, Maud. That's been really very special for us. Thank you so much for coming on to our show today. That's been wonderful. Thank you.
It's been very special for me. Thank you.
You're listening to Women Making Waves radio show and podcast, brought to you by Suzie Thorpe and Linda Ness. This show is all about women doing extraordinary things.
Our guest today is Rachel Hales. Now, we think it's fair to say Rachel is a driving force for compassion and change. Inspired by her parents' kindness, she has spent over 30 years transforming lives in Cambridgeshire. A career that has been supporting families facing poverty has fueled her belief in the power of collaboration. As the founder of Get Synergised and With the Purpose Network, she is pioneering groundbreaking partnerships to address local challenges and champion social good. Welcome to Women Making Waves, Rachel. It's great to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me on.
One of your slogans is, I believe business is a force for good. Now, what does it mean for a business to act with purpose, Rachel?
Oh, a really good question. Purpose pretty much permeates the heart of my business, actually. And I think when I'm connecting with businesses and thinking about what does purpose mean for them, I guess businesses that are generating wealth, doing really good, particularly in a city like Cambridge, there is another side of a business which I think more and more we're seeing people wanting to look to see in businesses, where they do more than just making money, but they find a way that through their business that they can do good. And I think that's where that purpose element comes in. It's like almost this profit and purpose that work simultaneously, and how businesses can use their skills, their time, their resource, finance, what many would call giving back or moving on from corporate social responsibility to being ingrained in how businesses should behave and be, as well as making money. Does that answer your question?
It does. And we'll talk about how hard it is, but let's find out basically about Get Synergized and With Purpose Network.
Yeah, so basically, I think as you said at the beginning, having worked in communities for many years and being the intersection between community and business, I founded Get Synergized, which is a business consultancy service effectively, to really help bridge the gap between the business world and the non-profit world. Because I think, as you've said, it can be challenging for businesses to know where and how to engage in their communities. And many want to, they're doing really well, and they want to find ways that they can be socially responsible. And so Get Synergized was founded to bridge that gap. But there's two things that we do. We work with businesses around embedding social responsibility within the core fabric of their business, and that's the consultancy side. And then the With Purpose Network is a new membership network that we launched this year, January 2025, and we have over 80 members now, businesses, charities, social enterprises coming together to network in person online. So we create that space and place for businesses to be able to find partners that they might want to work with for social good.
How long did that take for you to start this business? Because this business is quite a recent one. It's 2018, wasn't it? So we're talking 6 years now, aren't we?
So I went travelling Australia. I decided to leave my job. I know, I was 40, single.
I love that.
What am I going to do with my one precious life? What I've got more years ahead of me. What do I want to do? And I was working for an amazing charity called Romsey Mill. Loved the work, but it just came to a natural season for me to be thinking, I want to do something different. And it was through a number of sort of thoughts and experiences that I chose to leave Romsey Mill, didn't have a job, went travelling to Australia for 2.5 months. And it was during that time I really pondered this: how could I be a conduit to bring the sectors together? They're two different organisations. They function two different, or sectors, shall I say. They function very differently, and I think we can get them to understand each other better. And so I guess the journey was really listening to what I thought the businesses were challenged by and what the charities and social enterprises were challenged by, and how I could mould the service to really meet those needs. And that's where I've really honed in the last year or so on the business consultancy side, and then the With Purpose Network. So I think I've reached my sweet spot of really being able to go, I think this is where it is. And that process has been long and challenging and windy. But I think that's what happens when you do a startup. And then if you I'm now hitting the growth phase, which is really, really exciting.
So you did some travelling and then you met your husband, and when you were 40. How was that? What sort of experience was that? Because sometimes when you've been doing things and you've created a really interesting life for yourself, and you've been a very strong woman, I can tell you're a strong woman, and suddenly you get to meet the love of your life. How did you react to that?
Oh, there's a story behind this, if you want to hear it. So I guess my life stage was not as I expected. I didn't expect to be single at 40 without children, for sure. I think that's probably why in my mid-30s I started thinking about what's my next step, really? What am I good at? What do I love? What do I want to do with my one precious life? Where are my natural skills? Where is my natural talents? And that's something I kind of like to encourage young women or even young men to think about. What am I really good at? What am I naturally good at? So I spent quite a bit of time doing that. And so when I went travelling to Australia, it was very much, I'm going to go and do what I want to get on with. I'm in a really privileged position that I don't have children. I've got my own place in Cambridge. I have the opportunity to do this. So I went with this expectation of my life isn't defined by finding a husband as much as I would really love that. And obviously the opportunity for children was getting further and further away. So I went travelling with that mindset of I'm just going to get on with life. So then to come back, and actually quickly within me coming back in the February, I met him in the April. And there's another story. I also matchmade to my own husband. So for me, my faith's quite important to me. And so I wanted to find a partner that shared those similar values in a Christian faith. So I actually set up a social network in my church to find a husband. And people laugh. It was for 30s and 40s. And it's whatever season of life you were in, whether it was widowed, divorced or children, sometimes it can be quite lonely. So we set up a network a couple of years before. I was like, if I can't find a husband, maybe I need to be proactive to actually try and create something where I could meet them. The church that I was at, there was quite a lot of people. So it's really hard to meet people. And lo and behold, I come back and he turns up at one of the events when I've come back from Australia, and we get to know each other, build a friendship, learn to understand a bit about one another in a really relaxed environment. And I'm like, you've got all the qualities that I pretty much was looking for. And there we go. So not only do I matchmake businesses and charities, I was able to find my own husband, but I'd lived a lot on my own. So for sure, it was a big adjustment. But I think when you find that right person and you've waited and you've maybe learned a lot in your life, and for him as well, you're not prepared to compromise. I wasn't ever prepared to compromise. I would rather been happy to be on my own. But actually, he adds so much to me and vice versa that I feel really blessed, actually. So yeah, I came back and not only started the growth of my business, but then found a man that I absolutely adore, and he's a keeper for sure.
You say very proudly that your parents are your inspiration for the work that you do now. Can you give us a little insight into why you say this, why your parents and your mum as well? I know your father died a few years ago, but give us a little bit of an insight to how you get to where you are because of the inspiration of your parents.
Yeah, I think my earliest memory when I was about 13 years of age was when my parents said, we're going to have a young man come and live in our home with us. He's 26 and he's been in prison for armed robbery for 6 years, and he's homeless and he has nowhere to go. So he's going to come be in our family home. And I think that, amongst many other experiences of my parents having this kind of like quite open house mentality, if somebody's in need or needs something, how can we help? And I think I was modelled that quite early on as a child. My father ran his own accountancy firm, and they were both kind of, I remember we had a snooker table in our house and all the young people used to come round and play snooker, and I think my parents just created space and time for people. And I think they modelled to me, if you've got the time or the resource or the finance to help improve somebody's life, and you can, why wouldn't you? So I guess that always stayed with me, and I was modelled that. And my father passed away suddenly in 2001 of a heart attack, which was really shocking. Yeah, it was really sudden as a family. And my mum had known my father since she was very young. And so that was a real challenge for her to do life without my dad, really. She ended up in a mental health hospital for a period of time due to severe depression and anxiety. Her whole world turned upside down. So, as a child, I guess at that age, actually, I was about 24, I stayed at home to sort of be there with my mum as she rebuilt her life, really. And it was after my father passed, I heard even more countless stories of things my father did that I had no idea about. His generosity, his kindness to people. And then my mum sort of rebuilt her life, worked at Daily Bread for good 20 odd years, started volunteering and then ended up being employed, and she rebuilt her sort of life. She's now retired from Daily Bread, but she runs the food bank in Waterbeach at the age of 74, I think she is now. She's just my inspiration. She's a fighter and I love her dearly. And yeah, to see her doing that, she's not slowing down for sure.
That was something I was going to ask you about, actually, because going back to the Force for Good, a question of how you enable a company to become part of the positive impact and giving back to the world. And that is part of your job, isn't it? That is your consultancy. Do you find it a challenge, or do you find it's very enlightening for companies to come to you? I'm sure they learn so much from you. But is it something that you find that some companies just don't have perhaps the finance? How do you actually help the clients do this?
I think there is a huge value, doesn't matter what size of organisation you are, whether you're a one-man band or an office of 1,000, there is some way that you can consider of your own contribution of what you might do. And that's why I always encourage businesses to think about it in a broader sense than just money. Because actually what charitable organisations want is longer-term partnerships. They want a business that's going to be with them for a little while, sharing their story. And some of the things that businesses can do don't need to be financial, though we know that charities need that. We have a lot of need in the community, and that is really important for their long-term sustainability. But businesses can support in terms of time, skills, expertise and resource. So it might be that a small business isn't able to give loads of money financially, but they could do a social media review for a charity on how to improve their awareness raising. There's so many ways that businesses can get involved. And I guess the work I do with businesses when they come to me is they've already understood that this is an important way to do business. It's a good way for you to demonstrate as a business that you care about what your employees care about or what your customers might care about. And we know these days people want to work for companies that care. There's huge statistics on retaining talent and attracting talent for businesses, with the next generation of workforce is asking these questions, interviews, what do you do? What are your values? How do you care about the community as well as me and what I care about? But also customers are wanting companies to be more socially, environmentally responsible. So there's a real desire from the stakeholders to see businesses acting responsibly. But I find there's different levels. You've got the big companies that have got somebody employed to do this work around sustainability, ESG, CSR, brilliant. And then there's those organisations that want to do something but don't employ, and that's where my sweet spot comes in. I'm able to come in, really help build a strategy around this, that maybe in the future they do want to employ somebody to take on this work. But they're keen, they're ready, and they're the kind of businesses that I don't have to convince them that it's a good thing. They know it's the right thing to do. They just want to do it more strategically and better. And they're the businesses that I love working with. But then I've worked with one-man bands who just want to do something but just want to have a bit of a focus and strategy on who's a good partner for them and why is that.
Yeah. Through your career, you've done a lot of volunteering work as well as travelling as well. But primarily you have done a lot of local work and you mentor young girls. Is that right?
Yes, I think it's been a sort of a natural thing. I remember my first experience when I was working for a company. I was an MVQ assessor. They enabled us to do what was called mentoring in schools. And I mentored 2 girls in schools. One I'm still in contact with, actually. And it was really, life was a bit challenging at home, and the school had opened out for business professionals to come in and mentor. So I remember doing that. But over the years, I've always seemed to, if there's natural affinity with somebody that I've connected with, I'm like, actually, how can I support you? And more recently, I mentored a young lady, she's in her early 20s now, in a leadership role that she was within an organisation. And then there's a young lady at the moment who's actually been on your show called Nadia Galbraith, and she's moving into her sort of music career. And I'm just coming alongside to support her in sort of that business world and creating some opportunities and helping her. Because I think when I started my business, if I'm honest, I struggled to find people to support me and help me. And I think as a business woman, you need, or any business leader really, you need to surround yourself with people that can support and encourage you. And I wished I'd have had more of that when I started. I may not have learnt some of the bad lessons that I did. So if I can support now other women moving into business that are younger than me, that's kind of what I do. And I've been doing that with Nadia, and that's been great.
You mentioned women in business, but how hard is it as a woman in business?
That's a really good question. I personally don't have a challenge in the respect of the belief in what I do and the model that I've got and what I'm seeking to do. I think for me particularly, it's been around those internal sort of dialogues of, what I do is of enough value? Is it, your own sort of self-worth type grappling? And I think that has probably come more of a thing for me that I've noticed wasn't ever in my early 20s and 30s, for sure. Maybe with a season of sort of perimenopausal for me particularly, and navigating that. I think that has coupled with running a business, trying to be all your roles, your own marketer, your own accountant, your own strategist. And I think sometimes you can feel quite lonely in that. And I'm really lucky that I'm I'm quite confident in building connections. Obviously, I run a network. I love that. I live and breathe it myself. But actually finding those people around you that can be your skills in your business coaching, your marketing. And I've had some really amazing people around me who have encouraged me on days where I've gone, I don't know if I've got the energy to do this. But I think my purpose and passion and belief in what I do has kept me going. But certainly as a lady in her, now heading towards 50, I've, battled probably more with that around the menopausal confidence questioning kind of thing more than anything.
It's always an elephant in the room, isn't it, when we talk about menopause, perimenopause, postmenopause. And I think now it is getting to the forefront. We are able to talk about it openly. I still think there's a few people that cringe about it, but it is a fact of life. And I think it's not a disease, it's biology, and that's what happens. And I think openly talking about it and allowing yourself a little bit of time to say, well, actually, this is how I feel at the moment is good.
Yeah, I mean, the other day I ran a workshop do some training for charities on how they can build relationships with businesses. And I think there was 6 of us women sitting around having a coffee before we ran the training workshop. And the conversation was menopause. It was great. We all shared, particularly because I came in saying, I'm having a hot flush. I guess for me, I'm always been quite an open person, that I don't mind being real and transparent. Obviously, there's a time and a place. So we chatted about that and had conversations. And I think also the challenge being a female in the age that I don't have any dependent children. But I obviously have my mum that's older. But that stage of life that you've got around woman in business, maybe having dependent children, maybe having parents that are older, how you navigate that. And I think one of the challenges I had recently as well is my husband had a mental health breakdown during the period of me growing the business. And I had to
sorry to hear that.
Yeah, and he's doing amazingly now. And he's very open and talks about his mental health experience, which is brilliant. And so do I. And I'm really happy to chat to any other women, because for that, I needed to have the support as much as he did. Because to care for your partner going through a mental health breakdown who wasn't able to work, and to manage being the sole earner and managing your business to continue to grow was a huge challenge. And I think I've just come out of the other side of that. And so as much as I don't have dependent children, we have other factors in life that, for me, my business is my sort of mission. I don't disconnect the two. It's what I live and breathe. So I had to navigate. And I think for ladies of a certain age or stage of life, for me particularly, navigating all of that, keeping on top of the house, all of those things that, me and my husband both do, but we're both working full time. We both work for ourselves. My husband's a builder, but yet both believing that we're doing what we're really passionate about and care about. But it's challenging.
It's having that sort of connection before going into an event, knowing actually you're not the only one going through this. There are millions of people. And especially an event where we don't know what's going on in people's lives, but actually it's very similar, isn't it?
Oh, I think you've hit the nail on the head. I run networking events as part of the With Purpose network, and we did one last week, and we did it at Mills and Reeve on their top floor. Beautiful. They're our hosts. They're our partners on the With Purpose network. They're members of the network and passionately believe in doing stuff in the community, and it's been great to work with them. But we hosted an event. We had about 65 businesses, charities and non-profit partners to come together to connect, to network effectively. But actually the first activity that we set everybody was a little bit of a challenge, were questions to do with who are you as a person. Let's get past the what do you do as a business, what do you do as a charity. We're here, we got everyone together to come together to say, how can I find help and give help? What do you need? But actually, in order for us to do our best work, my belief is those events should be getting past the business talk and actually just getting to know the person. So it's questions like, who would be your best dinner guest? And they were set, they were set challenges. But what it does is networking. It can be really painful for people.
Yes.
And so we set this tone of just get to know people, build a relationship, get to know the person behind the role, the title, the business, and that's where that synergy happens. And you get a business connecting with a non-profit, or a business connecting with a business to do business, where we go, people buy from people. They don't buy from things or institutions. They buy from people. And I totally agree with you. We need to get past the sort of professional corporate, I'm here to pitch or sell. I'm actually here to build relationships, and particularly through ours, I'm here to build relationships to do good. If business comes out of it later, brilliant. That can be a byproduct. But we're all here because we want to connect to do more than we could alone.
I think that's absolutely fantastic. I love that whole session beforehand, because a lot of people find networking particularly hard. You know, they've got a great idea, they've got a business, but they've also got business partners that do a little bit of socializing as well. But I think to talk about non-business things, about things that you like and do outside the business, actually, I can almost feel my shoulders just relaxing thinking about that. It's a great way, isn't it, of starting an event?
Yes, and I think that I understand that many networks, we are here to, to be aware of our services. Some people have a role to particularly go out and get new business, so I totally get that. But I think if in any event, if there's a little space or place to just get to know people, I think it really relaxes people, because nobody wants to be sold to, nobody wants to be pitched at, nobody wants to be given a business card bomber who's going to go around and try to connect with everybody in the room. You can sense it and feel it, and it actually puts you off. So I think any event, if you can create a space that warms people up to get to know people, I think it really helps. But there is a place for that structured interaction, whether it be selling services, etc., or discussing, but on a way that is not painful. Certainly ours is not about selling services. It is about how as a business can I help you, and how as a non-profit can I get you as a business to help me with things. But also there's things that non-profits can offer to businesses that can be part of their supply chain, or services that could help them too. So I try to look at mutually beneficial partnerships that really add value and make a difference.
Rachel, I hear you have won some amazing awards. Let's find out about that, please, as well.
Yeah, really, really exciting. So through the network, I've been able to glean some survey impact of our members and asking them how they've found the network and outputs of that. And as a result, I've been able to use that to apply for some awards. So yeah, I'm really delighted we won the Best Networking Group of the Year for 2024 in Cambridgeshire, which is exciting, very great, the gold winner. But what that means is when you're gold, you get to go to Wembley to go to the national finals. So me and my colleague Sarah, we're heading there in December to go forward for the national Best Networking Group of the Year. When humans and doing good are at the heart of it, I think people get really excited by that. There's something a bit different and a bit unique from your traditional networking. And then we won the award for collaboration as a highly commended from the Cambridge Independent. So definitely what we're doing is being recognised through those awards as something really, really positive.
What's happening now? What's the future for you? What does the future look like for your businesses and your roles at the moment?
Yeah, so the network, as I said, we launched in the new part of this year. I'm really excited that we've built a new members area for the With Purpose network that will be open up to the new members this month. That's really exciting. It's through the website. And so we're really encouraging more and more businesses that want to be part of that community. That isn't just about solely you as a business doing your thing, but being part of the ecosystem within the city around business, non-profit partnerships. We cover Cambridgeshire with the network, but there is a desire and there's a need. I've been contacted by other areas, other counties in the UK. The network moment is Cambridgeshire, but there is potential possibility to replicate the model in other parts of the country where it is needed. There's definitely a desire for businesses, non-profits to come together in this way. So that's really exciting. And so for me, really, it's about really looking at delivering those outputs and impacts that we can measure to say this is the benefit, the impact and the difference it's making, not just for the businesses and charities, but for me, about the people within the partnerships, the beneficiaries of the partnerships, the children, young people and families who are directly benefiting. I want to hear some of those stories around the difference we're making. At the event that we did last week, we shared some of that, because I think we can talk about the partnerships, but actually ultimately we're partnering because we want to do good, and let's hear the stories of the difference we're making in our communities. And Cambridge needs that for sure.
And as much as Cambridge is a fantastic place, Cambridgeshire is a very large place, isn't it? And there are definitely, as you say, disparities and challenges around. Does that hang over your shoulders quite a bit? Do you find that quite hard?
Yeah, I think I think having been somebody that has worked in the city, I used to do youth outreach work in Albury. I've worked with young people not in education, employment and training. I've worked in teenage pregnancy. I've worked in all probably spheres of homelessness, domestic abuse, all sorts of issues, housing, homelessness, poverty. I have seen it myself, and when you see it, you can't help but be changed. And I think that's probably a big motivation for me, that I see the huge wealth and opportunities in the city. You know, we're growing at a rate in Cambridge, which is brilliantly exciting. We've got a lot of innovation, but we need it to be good growth. And we have an inequality problem. We know that, we've talked about it. And I think we all have our part to play in being responsible in how we make sure that that divide as we grow as a city does not keep growing and growing. But those people in the pockets of our city where life isn't good for them, where we've got services working directly with those families because there's need and poverty and lack of opportunity, as a city we need to respond to that. And there's some great initiatives happening in line with the With Purpose Network, and I love to work in collaboration with those. But if what I'm doing can help businesses find a route to build connections for the long term to help readdress that balance, then that would be my aim. And to really encourage it, as I said at the beginning, any business that is doing well in the city and generating wealth and doing good should find their way of going, and how can I give back to the community that serves me?
It's a good thing to end, isn't it? How can we give back? Rachel, it's been fantastic to talk to you today. Thank you so much, Rachel.
Thank you.
That's all we have time for today on Women Making Waves. Our thanks go to our guests, Maud Blair and Rachel Hales. We're always on the lookout to feature women living extraordinary lives, so please do contact us if you know of someone we should be talking to.
You can contact us via social media on X and Facebook at WomenMW, or on Instagram at Women Making Waves. You can also find us on cambridge.radio or visit our website womenmakingwaves.co.uk, where you can hear all of our interviews.